This is a demo of the Illumio adaptive security platform. And what we see here is the Illumination View, which is the application dependency map. What we're doing is we're showing you the actual applications and the workloads and the connections of those workloads and applications across various locations. They may be different data centers, they may be different cloud environments, but this allows you to think about your application environment in the context of the application so that you can create policy and so that you can understand risk. Let's go ahead and zoom in on one of these applications. And basically, each of these bubbles represents a different application. And because of the way that we label these workloads in the applications, we know that this particular application on the left-hand side is a point-of-sales application in the PCI environment in California, in the California location. And that particular application is comprised of a number of different workloads represented by those little boxes. And this happens to be a three-tiered application with some web workloads, a processing tier with 3 processing tier workloads, and a few of the database workloads. And we also see red and green lines between these workloads. Now, a green line is a flow that we've identified, that we were aware of, and we've actually created a policy for that. And because we're a whitelist model, we're allowing that particular flow to occur. Where a red line is a flow that we've detected and no policy exists, so we're actually blocking those particular flows. Now, this particular view it's great for operations teams and security teams that need to look at the entire environment or applications that might be spread across different clouds and different data centers. But let's go ahead and take a look at a view that an application team might use to look at just their application and think about policy in that context. So we're going to use the application group map view to look at that point of sale application. Now, here in this view, this is a great view for an application team. We've actually abstracted the locations of the 35 workloads that comprise that application across the 5 different data centers. So it allows an application owner to just focus on the logic of that application and think about policy in the context of that logic. A couple of other things that we see in this view on the top right there, the consuming app groups. These are applications that are consuming services from that point of sale application. And then the providing app groups. These are applications that are providing services to the point of sale application. So we could actually drill down into those if we wanted to and create policy or look at how policy is being applied in those environments. But let's go ahead and create policy so we can allow these flows in this application. We'll go ahead and click on the policy generator capability. And what policy generator does is it auto-recommends optimal policy for your environment. Here we see that we can actually create what we call Interscope Rules, which will create policy for those workloads that fit inside of the application. We can also do that, what we call extra scope rules for flows that might consume external services. But we're going to focus on the Interscope rules for now. So when we click on this button, we have a couple of different options in front of us. I can create a variety of different levels of granularity for policy. The first option is to create an app group level policy, which basically creates a perimeter around all of the workloads within that application, allowing all the workloads to talk to all of the workloads. Now, since this is a PCI application, I probably want to get a little bit more granular. I can do role level policy, which would allow me to define policy between different roles or different tiers of this application. I can even get more granular and get down to the port and protocol and process level and create very, very granular, what we call nano segmentation policies. But let's go ahead and do a role level policy and apply that. And actually, one of the things I want to point out is that as I click on each of these different levels, the suggested policies down below change because obviously we're creating different policies for those different types of scenarios. If I click Save, I have the ability to review the policy that I'm suggesting, and then I'll click OK. And now this policy doesn't go into enforcement. It allows the application teams to suggest these policies, and it allows the security teams to do a final check before the button is clicked and we push that into enforcement. Because Illumio has the ability to model and test policy, what we're seeing here is a model of how this policy would actually be applied in this environment. And I can see now, or the application team can now go ahead and verify that the policy that they selected is enforcing good behavior in their environment. So another thing that we can do with Illumio is start to ask questions about the application environment. And we're going to do that by using our Explorer feature. And Explorer allows for a couple of different views and allows for a couple of different use cases. One of the use cases might be a compliance officer that might be in your office asking questions about how you've protected or how you've secured that PCI environment. What we can do is take a look at a tabular view that would be familiar to a PCI officer or an auditor, for example. This shows IP addresses, and it also shows the allowed and blocked on the left-hand side. So it tells me which flows have occurred and if those flows have been allowed or blocked for this application. It also gives me a little bit of context. So we're actually pulling in the labels for these flows or for these workloads, and I can tell where these flows are coming from. So I have a little bit more context. I'm not just dealing with ports and IP addresses as I might be in a normal world of the firewall or network-based protections. Now let's go back to the previous view, the parallel coordinates view, and see how we can use this tool to identify risk in the environment. So still focusing on the point of sales application, one of the things I might want to do is look and see what is interacting with my point of sales application from the production environment. And I can go ahead and click and assess. As I click, I'm digging deeper and deeper into the data. I can see that there's the ordering application is interacting with point of sales. I see that we're consuming some services from some core services, which makes sense. But I also notice that there is an HRM, an HR management application that's interacting with my point of sales application. And that's something that is of concern. It seems like an anomaly. I want to dig a little bit deeper. There's a web workload there, and I can see it's speaking to my point of sales application using the MySQL port 3306. And it's actually, this web workload is actually trying to hit a bunch of different web servers across this distributed application. So let's head back over to the Illumination View, that application dependency map, and see if we can pinpoint that workload. So with this view, you can see it's very visual. I can see that there's a workload in that HRM application with a number of different red flows emanating from it, which tell me that there are flows that are outside of policy that are trying to occur. Now, since we're a whitelist model, these flows are actually being blocked. But one of the things that we can do to take an extra safeguard is to click and drag that workload into a quarantine area. And when I do that, what we're actually doing, what the policy compute engine is actually doing, is it's recalculating policy for that workload. It's removing any previous policy that may allow it to interact with other workloads in the environment. And it's basically creating a very simple policy to allow an admin to SSH into that workload and perform forensics.